What if I told you that the person cleaning your office floors could be the most brilliant legal mind in the building? Picture this. A courthouse in chaos, a millionaire abandoned by his high-powered attorney, and the janitor, yes, the janitor, about to deliver the most stunning courtroom performance in legal history. Have you ever been invisible at work? Overlooked because of your job title, your uniform, or where you came from? Most of us have felt that sting of being judged by appearances rather than abilities. We live in a world that measures worth by office size, salary figures, and designer suits. But what happens when the person everyone ignores turns out to be the hero everyone needs? Tonight, I'm sharing the jaw-dropping true story of Maurice Bell, a man who mopped floors for 20 years while secretly possessing a legal brilliance that would save an innocent millionaire from prison and expose a conspiracy that rocked an entire community. This is a story that will make you question every assumption you've ever made about success, intelligence, and the power of doing what's right when everyone else looks the other way. If you believe everyone deserves a second look, smash that like button right now. Because what you're about to witness proves that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they. For nearly 20 years, Maurice Bell's alarm clock rang at 4:30 a.m., 6 days a week. By 5:45, he was unlocking the doors of the Alama County Courthouse, wheeling in his car to cleaning supplies, ready to make the marble floors shine before the lawyers, judges, and defendants arrived for another day of legal drama. Maurice had perfected the art of invisibility. He moved through the courthouse like a ghost, wiping down benches while attorneys argued million-dollar cases, emptying trash cans filled with the remnants of plea bargains, mopping around the feet of people who never bothered to look down and acknowledge his existence. But Maurice saw everything. 20 years of silent observation had taught him to read people better than any psychology textbook. He could spot a lying witness from across the courtroom, identify which lawyers were truly passionate about justice versus those just chasing paychecks, and sense when someone was carrying the weight of genuine innocence versus manufactured alibis. The attorneys in their $1,000 suits had no idea that the quiet man with the mop had passed the bar exam 23 years ago. They didn't know that Maurice had once been on track to become one of the city's most promising defense attorneys, before personal tragedy shattered his confidence and sent him seeking solace in the simple, honest work of keeping things clean. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident caused by a drunk driver who walked free on a technicality Maurice missed in his own defense strategy. The guilt consumed him. He couldn't bear the thought of another family suffering because of his legal mistakes. So he abandoned his practice, sold his law books, and found peace in work where the results were immediate and visible. Dirty floors became clean, chaos became order. But Maurice was hiding a secret that would change everything. Because even though he'd walk away from the law had never walked away from him. Among all the people Maurice observed during his years of invisible service, one stood out. Harold Breckenridge, a local millionaire who owned several businesses throughout the county. Unlike other wealthy clients, Harold always nodded respectfully when he passed Maurice in the hallways. More than once, Maurice had overheard Harold quietly arranging donations for courthouse employees facing family emergencies, never seeking credit or recognition. Comment if you know someone whose talents are overlooked at work, because what's about to happen will make you see every invisible person in your life completely differently. Tuesday morning exploded with scandal that shook Alama County to its core. Harold Breckenridge, the respected millionaire businessman, was arrested on charges of massive corporate fraud. The allegations were devastating. Missing company funds, secret offshore accounts, falsified financial records, and a web of deception that supposedly stretched back years. The local media descended like vultures. Millionaire's million-dollar lies screamed the newspaper headlines. Television reporters camped outside the courthouse, broadcasting live updates about the greed and corruption of another wealthy elite who thought he was above the law. Public opinion turned brutal and immediate. Social media exploded with condemnation. Harold's business partners distanced themselves. His country club membership was revoked. Friends who'd attended his charity galas for decades suddenly couldn't return his phone calls. But the real devastation came on Wednesday morning, during what should have been a routine pre-trial hearing. Harold high-powered attorney Marcus Wellington, famous for his theatrical courtroom performances and his track record of defending wealthy clients, stood before Judge Patterson with a bombshell announcement. Your Honor, due to irreconcilable differences with my client regarding defense strategy, I am withdrawing from this case effective immediately. The courtroom erupted. Harold's face went pale. The prosecutor smiled. Wellington gathered his expensive briefcase, ignored Harold's desperate whispers, and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance, leaving his client alone and defenseless before a pack of hungry reporters and vengeful shareholders. Mr. Breckinridge, Judge Patterson said sternly, you have 48 hours to secure new representation, or we'll proceed with a court-appointed attorney. Given the complexity of these charges and the public interest in this case, I strongly advise you to find experienced counsel immediately. But Harold's reputation was toxic. 3 law firms turned him down that same day. Word spread quickly through the legal community. The Breckinridge case was career suicide. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The media narrative was set, and no attorney wanted to attach their name to what appeared to be an obvious fraud conviction. As Thursday morning approached, Harold sat alone in the defendant's chair, facing financial ruin, public humiliation, and likely decades in prison. The man who'd spent his life building businesses and supporting his community was about to be destroyed by accusations he couldn't defend against without legal help. Maurice watched it all unfold from his position in the corner, methodically mopping the same section of floor as he processed what he was witnessing. He'd seen enough trials to recognize the setup. A man being railroaded by circumstantial evidence, while the real criminals remained hidden in the shadows. Something wasn't right about this case. Morris's 20 years of observation had taught him to spot deception, and Harold Breckinridge didn't carry himself like a guilty man. He moved like someone genuinely confused and betrayed, not someone caught in his own web of lies. That's when Maurice made a decision that would shock everyone in the courthouse and change 2 lives forever. Thursday morning arrived with Harold Breckinridge sitting alone at the defendant's table, no lawyer beside him, facing a prosecutor who was clearly enjoying the opportunity to demolish a wealthy target without opposition. The gallery buzzed with reporters and curious onlookers, all waiting to witness what promised to be a legal execution. Judge Patterson called the court to order with obvious frustration. Mr. Breckinridge, I see you still have no representation. I'm prepared to appoint. Your Honor, the voice cut through the courtroom chatter like a blade. Every head turned to see Maurice Bell, still wearing his janitor's uniform, standing in the back of the room with his hand raised. Excuse me. Judge Patterson blinked in confusion. Maurice walked slowly down the center aisle, past the shocked stares of lawyers and reporters. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his voice remained steady. Your Honor, I request permission to address the court. The prosecutor actually laughed out loud. Judge, I don't know what kind of disruption this is, but I know this man. Judge Patterson said quietly, studying Maurice with sudden recognition. Maurice Bell, you used to practice before this court, didn't you? Years ago. Yes, Your Honor. I passed the bar 23 years ago. I'm still licensed, though I haven't practiced in 2 decades. The courtroom fell silent. Every person present was trying to process what they were hearing. The courthouse janitor was a lawyer? Mr. Bell. Judge Patterson said carefully, what exactly are you requesting? Maurice turned to look at Harold, who was staring at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. I'm requesting permission to represent Mr. Breckinridge. If he'll have me. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A janitor can't just... A licensed attorney, Judge Patterson corrected firmly, can represent any client who chooses to hire him, regardless of his current employment status. Harold stood slowly, extending his hand to Maurice. Mr. Bell, I've watched you work in this courthouse for years. You're one of the most honest men I know. If you're willing to help me, I'm honored to have you as my attorney. They shook hands while cameras flashed and reporters frantically scribbled notes. The headline was already writing itself. Janitor becomes lawyer in courtroom shocker. Very well. Judge Patterson said, banging his gavel. Mr. Bell, you have exactly 1 week to prepare your defense. Given the unusual circumstances, I'm granting continuance. Court will reconvene next Thursday. As the courtroom emptied in chaos, Maurice and Harold remained behind, 2 unlikely allies facing impossible odds. "Mr. Bell," Harold said quietly, "I have to ask, why are you doing this? You don't even know if I'm innocent." Maurice looked at the man he'd observed for 20 years. "Mr. Breckenridge, I've cleaned up after enough guilty people to recognize innocence when I see it. And I've been watching you secretly help courthouse families for 2 decades. A man who shows kindness when he thinks nobody's looking doesn't suddenly become a fraud. Have you ever had to choose between safety and doing what's right? Share your story in the comments, because what Maurice did next would prove that courage comes from the most unexpected places." Maurice Bell hadn't touched a law book in 20 years, but muscle memory kicked in the moment he opened the first evidence box. Harold's case was a labyrinth of financial records, corporate documents, and witness statements. Exactly the kind of complex fraud case that required meticulous attention to detail and the ability to spot patterns others missed. Working 18-hour days in Harold's conference room, Maurice approached the case like he approaches janitorial work, methodically, thoroughly, and with the patience to clean every corner until the truth emerged. His 20 years of invisible observation had given him a unique advantage. He knew how to see what others overlooked. The prosecution's case seemed airtight on the surface. Financial records showed money disappearing from Harold's companies. Bank statements revealed suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. 3 witnesses claimed they'd personally seen Harold authorizing the fraudulent transactions. But Maurice noticed things the previous lawyers had missed. The suspicious bank transfers all occurred on days when Harold was provably in other cities for business meetings. The accounting software showed access logs that didn't match Harold's known computer usage patterns. Most telling of all, the 3 prosecution witnesses had remarkably similar testimony. Too similar, as if they'd rehearsed their stories. "Harold," Maurice said during their 3rd night of investigation, "who else had access to your company's financial systems?" "My business partner, Derek Morrison, obviously. My accountant, Lisa Zhang, and my assistant, Patricia Coleman, handled some of the day-to-day banking operations." Maurice made notes. "Tell me about Derek Morrison." Harold's expression darkened. "We've been partners for 15 years. He's brilliant with numbers, handles most of our international operations. But lately," Harold paused, choosing his words carefully, "he's been pressuring me to expand faster, take bigger risks. When I insisted on more conservative growth, he got angry, called me old-fashioned and afraid of real success." That's when Maurice found the smoking gun. Buried in the 5th evidence box was a document the prosecution had submitted but apparently never fully analyzed. A corporate insurance policy that Derek Morrison had purchased 6 months before Harold's arrest. The policy would pay Derek $10 million if Harold was convicted of fraud and their business partnership was dissolved. Morris's janitor instincts kicked in. When something seemed out of place in the courthouse, it usually was. This insurance policy was very out of place. Working through the night, Maurice cross-referenced Morrison's travel schedules with the suspicious financial transactions. Every single fraudulent transfer coincided with Morrison's presence in the office and Harold's absence from the city. Then Maurice did something that demonstrated the power of his 20-year courthouse education. He started investigating the prosecution witnesses, using public records and social media searches. Skills he'd learned from watching private investigators work cases. He discovered that all 3 witnesses had recently received unexplained deposits into their bank accounts. Same amount, same day, same source, a shell company owned by Derek Morrison. "They're not just lying," Maurice told Harold as dawn broke over their evidence-covered conference table. "They're being paid to lie." But proving it would require something Maurice hadn't done in 2 decades, perform in a courtroom like the lawyer he used to be, not the janitor he'd become. What Maurice found next would expose the real criminals and prove that sometimes the most devastating evidence is hidden in plain sight. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity when Maurice Bell walked through the doors that Thursday morning. Camera crews lined the hallways. National media had picked up the janitor lawyer's story, turning Harold's trial into must-see television. Maurice had traded his janitor uniform for a simple navy suit. Not expensive, but clean and pressed with the same attention to detail he'd applied to every floor he'd ever mopped. Carrying a worn briefcase he'd retrieved from storage, he looked like what he was. A man returned to fight for justice after a 20-year absence. The prosecutor, District Attorney Richardson, was clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight. This was his chance to take down both a wealthy fraud and make national headlines by demolishing an amateur lawyer who thought he could play in the big leagues. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Richardson began his opening statement. This case is about greed, deception, and a wealthy man who thought his money made him above the law. The evidence will show that Harold Breckenridge systematically stole from his own companies, hiding millions in offshore accounts while his employees and investors trusted him with their futures. Richardson laid out the prosecution's case with theatrical flair. Financial records showing missing money, bank transfers to secret accounts, and 3 witnesses who would testify to Harold's guilt. It looked devastating. Then it was Maurice's turn. He stood slowly, walked to the jury box, and spoke in the same quiet, respectful tone he'd used to greet courthouse visitors for 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maurice Bell. For the past 20 years, I've cleaned the floors of this courthouse. I've mopped around the feet of guilty people and innocent people, corrupt lawyers and honest ones. I've learned to tell the difference. The jury leaned forward. This wasn't the bombastic opening they'd expected. Harold Breckenridge is innocent. The real criminal is his business partner, Derek Morrison, who orchestrated this fraud and framed my client to collect a $10 million insurance payout. Over the next few days, I'm going to prove it using the same attention to detail I applied to every job I've ever done, by cleaning up until the truth shines through. The real fireworks began when Richardson called his first witness, Patricia Coleman, Harold's former assistant, who testified that she'd personally witnessed Harold authorizing suspicious transfers. During cross-examination, Maurice approached her with the patience of a man who'd spent decades observing human behavior. Ms. Coleman, you testified that you saw Mr. Breckenridge authorize transfers on March 15th. Are you certain of that date? Absolutely. I remember because it was unusual for him to work so late. Maurice walked to the evidence table, retrieving an airline ticket and hotel receipt. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit A, proof that Mr. Breckenridge was in Chicago on March 15th, giving a speech at a business conference. He didn't return to our city until March 17th. Patricia's face went pale. The prosecutor shuffled through his notes frantically. Ms. Coleman, Maurice continued gently, 3 weeks ago, you deposited $25,000 into your personal checking account. Can you tell the jury where that money came from? I don't recall. Let me refresh your memory. Maurice produced bank records. The money came from Morrison Holdings, a shell company owned by Derek Morrison. You were paid $25,000 to lie about Harold Breckenridge. The courtroom erupted. Patricia broke down on the witness stand, confessing through tears that Morrison had offered her money to frame Harold, threatening her job if she refused. But Maurice wasn't finished. He called his own surprise witness, Derek Morrison himself. Morrison took the stand confidently, clearly expecting soft questions from the amateur janitor lawyer. He got a master class in cross-examination instead. Mr. Morrison, you purchased a $10 million insurance policy 6 months before Mr. Breckenridge's arrest. Isn't that correct? That's standard business practice. A policy that pays you $10 million specifically if your partner is convicted of fraud? Morrison's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury was paying attention now. Maurice methodically presented evidence. Morrison's access to the company's financial systems, his presence during every suspicious transaction, his payments to prosecution witnesses, and his insurance policy motive. The final blow came when Maurice revealed that he'd traced the offshore accounts not to Harold, but to shell companies Morrison had established using Harold's stolen identity information. Mr. Morrison, Maurice said quietly, isn't it true that you stole from your own company, framed your partner, and bribed witnesses to send an innocent man to prison so you could collect $10 million? Morrison's composure finally cracked. You don't understand the pressure, the competition. Harold was holding us back. His lawyer was screaming objections, but Morrison kept talking, admitting to the scheme that had nearly destroyed Harold's life. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Not guilty on all counts. As the verdict was read, Harold embraced Maurice while the courtroom exploded in applause. Justice had been served by a janitor who understood that truth, like cleanliness, required patience and attention to detail to achieve. The aftermath of Harold Breckenridge's acquittal sent shockwaves through Alama County that extended far beyond the courthouse walls. Derek Morrison was arrested within hours of his courtroom confession, ultimately pleading guilty to fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy charges that would send him to prison for 15 years. But the real story was Maurice Bell's transformation from invisible janitor to celebrated attorney, and how that transformation changed an entire community's understanding of worth, dignity, and hidden potential. The media attention was overwhelming. From mop to legal victory, dominated headlines nationwide. Talk show hosts wanted interviews. Publishers offered book deals. Law schools invited Maurice to speak about second chances and unconventional paths to justice. Harold Breckenridge, cleared of all charges and grateful beyond words, offered to set Maurice up with his own law practice, complete with office space, staff, and all the resources he'd need to return to legal work permanently. But Maurice surprised everyone with his response. "Harold, I appreciate everything you're offering, but I've found my calling. For 20 years, I've had a front row seat to justice in this courthouse. I've seen good lawyers and bad ones, honest people and corrupt ones. I think I could do more good by staying right here, helping people who need an advocate but can't afford one." Maurice returned to work the following Monday, not as a janitor, but as the courthouse's first public defender custodian, a position Harold helped create and fund. Maurice would continue maintaining the building while offering free legal consultation to anyone who walked through its doors needing help. The arrangement was perfect for Maurice, who had learned that some of life's most important work happens in the quiet moments between dramatic courtroom victories. He could spot someone in legal trouble the moment they entered his courthouse, and now he had the authority to help them navigate the system. Harold and Maurice's friendship deepened into something like brotherhood. Every month, they met for dinner to discuss Harold's charitable foundation work and Maurice's pro bono cases. The millionaire businessman and the janitor lawyer had found that shared values mattered more than different backgrounds. The case transformed how the entire community viewed service work. Suddenly, people were paying attention to custodians, security guards, and maintenance staff who kept their workplaces running. Children started asking questions about the invisible people they'd never noticed before. Maurice's story became required reading in local schools, teaching students that intelligence, wisdom, and heroism come in all forms, sometimes wearing uniforms society overlooks. Most importantly, Maurice's courage to step forward when it mattered most inspired others to act. The courthouse began seeing more people volunteer for jury duty, more citizens attending public meetings, and more individuals choosing to get involved in their community's pursuit of justice. "You know what I learned from all this?" Maurice told a reporter 6 months after the trial. "Everyone has something valuable to contribute. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or important enough to make a difference. The question is whether you're brave enough to try when the moment comes." Harold Breckenridge, his reputation restored and his businesses thriving, used his second chance to establish scholarship programs for first-generation college students and funding for public defender offices across the state. His near destruction had taught him that justice shouldn't depend on wealth, and his salvation had come from someone society had deemed unimportant. The real victory wasn't just Maurice saving Harold. It was both men proving that heroism lives in unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to emerge and change the world. If this story proves that everyone has hidden potential waiting for the right moment, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to see that their current job doesn't define their future impact. Because somewhere in your community, there's another Maurice Bell quietly observing, learning, and preparing to step forward when justice needs a champion. And remember, the next time you pass someone in uniform, cleaning an office or maintaining a building, you might be walking past a person who will change your life. The greatest heroes often come disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary work with extraordinary character. Who in your life has talents that others overlook? Let me know in the comments below, because everyone deserves to have their potential recognized and celebrated.